Hello, BAME farm fans. Isn't my hat just festive? It matches our current project. Doing a little bit of fixing on the 300 John Deere picker. What are we fixing? Well, got a lot of boxes, some new green paint stuff there, a table full of tools and parts and bits, a hammer, that's always useful. And there's some stuff missing in here. So I'm in the middle of redoing the husking bed. Now there's these lovely fellows out in Pennsylvania who run a little business called JD Huskers. And they supply a full line of aftermarket parts for the John Deere pickers and the 40 series corn heads. So, if, you don't have to have a picker to buy parts from them. You can buy, parts for your corn head for your combine. And they blow the dealers out of the water on price. These are what the new rubber rolls look like. I don't have an old one, but you can kind of see this little piece of rubber is old rubber. I don't think they had enough room to get one of these big discs in here. And they cut these things meaty. Like, look at the big holes, big blocks of rubber. It's really gonna claw in and pull the ear off. And at the bottom, we'll flip this over. They put some extra metal in between the rubber because this is the spot right here. The bottom 2-3 inches is where the rolls will wear out. Because the shank won't pull off and it'll spin and spin, so these extra little metal bits will pull that off. So the roll will not wear. And we will be able to husk nice, clean, yellow wagon loads of ear corn. Now, unfortunately I missed some of this. And I struggle to make, or I don't know, I think it's a struggle to make a good fix-it video. Because usually there's a lot of time, hard to get all the action in. So obviously got it all apart. That was fun. I pulled the whole bed out. All these are bearing boxes. They're Chinese. Not my first choice, but it's what JD Huskers had. And they had a decent price, because I put all new bearings in. There's bearing holders. I'm getting good with spherical bearings. I don't know where that went. Yeah, spherical bearings. I'm getting good at these. We're putting new bushings in the rocker arms. I got new bushings. This one's fairly tight. This one doesn't have the proper bushing in it. This is just a chunk of copper somebody found. Yeah, don't you like buying used equipment? But they don't make these anymore. So the biggest, I don't want to say, there's multiple pieces of advice. And I don't know if there's any good order. But I will say, these front set of rolls come out last and go in first. And now JD Huskers has paperwork that'll tell you how to do all this, but they assume you're leaving the brackets, the rocker arms, that you don't need to replace bearings. That all you have to do is take the rocker arm loose and the rubber rolls will come right out this side, except for this front one, which will have to come out a little bit. You're going to hit the mounting bracket here for the drive shaft. This mounts right there. Obviously, you can remove that. But you got to do a lot of disassembly. That's not coming off too easily. So this one is supposed to go out over the elevator on this side. I don't know how. Since all I did, well, I'll say everything, I pulled everything out. I had to take these bottom bearing assemblies out. If we see more new green paint down here, I put new springs because this is why I know I don't trust other people to fix stuff. They did stuff like this. You see that? Look real close. You see it? They just cut a spring to length. Probably not the right tension. Maybe too much tension. Could be too little. Who knows? And then they just happen to be almost the right diameter. I mean, I know I've done some close enough fixes, but I don't know why that just bugged me. Because these are easy access. I mean, there's stuff, I gotta show off the fix I did to the 250 with a bottle cap and a block of wood. I mean, that's, you know, that's rigging something up. But the work to do to properly do the fix was excessive. And hey, we haven't had any trouble from it. And maybe these folks didn't have any trouble from the springs. I don't know. So yeah, we replaced everything down here. The real fun part, and we might not see this in the darkness, is that the trash auger runs off a roller down here. So that was fun. And another thing, all the brushes, I took all the brushes off. I have a whole box of brand new brushes. Some of these weren't too bad. Like, those are still fairly long. They look ugly. They're not straight, but they're still long. Some of these over here, like, that's really worn. That one's really, really worn. I think previous owners had replaced the brushes on this back roll, but not the front one. Because these ones had the bolts to hold the brushes on were all in a line. This one was all cutesy, and each set of bolts was turned, you know, 1/6 of a turn around that hex shaft. Now for reinstallation, on these first two sets, I put in this bracket, and imagine there being 2 sets of rolls on it. So I put in the 2 metal rolls with their bearing holder down to the bottom end. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a joy to spherical bearings. They're meant to have a little bit of play in their holder. So they might not be straight. And I tried to eyeball straighten this. Well, it was a pain in the butt to get this set in. I eventually got them in there with lots of persuasion from our hammer. I got them in. I really don't like doing that. So I'm going to try something new on this set. I've already put one roll in. I'm going to put the other metal roll in and then put the cast holder in place. All the rubber rolls are going in individually. That'd be a whole lot to get lined up, all 4 rolls all at once. It's just as easy to put the metal ones in and then put the rubber ones in just to line up the bolt there on the rocker arm. Which JD Huskers has a special punch. I love the hitch on this thing. This has been my anvil over here. So I can punch the bushings out of the rocker arms through the hitch hole. Oh, there's only one of these left. And it's greasy as all get out. They made, I mean, it's not much. It's just a machined down piece of bar stock. Fits right in there to punch it out real nice. I'll show that off here in a minute. Yeah, so we're going to see how this goes, because I was not thrilled about doing that whole setup. Now, what really came in handy for putting all the rolls in, is this 2x4, which just happens to span the gap over the husking bed, and a piece of twine. You're not really farming if you're not using twine or barreling wire to fix stuff, right? This isn't a permanent fix, but it is very helpful for going under the, well, I can't do it one-handed, but it goes underneath the rolls. I tie it to here, and it holds them while I slide them in. Because I can only reach so far in here for leverage. Let's see, another thing we modified is we put husk pins in. Those are just spring rolls. Just longer versions of those little guys right there. And it's recommended to start with 6 at the top end in each roll. Put those in before you put the metal rolls back in the husk bed. I tried putting them in place. This machine has been my jungle gym. I have the bucket to stand on. You can see all the marks for my foot stepping here. There's a bunch of dust right there from me stepping and climbing. I've been down in here. Now, not with all the rolls in. I mean, that's pretty claustrophobic. It's dark right now. but it's very claustrophobic in there. I turned it into like a monkey. So if you're gonna fix one of these, get yourself a little monkey to be able to climb in and help with that bottom end of stuff. If not, you're gonna get a good workout and find out how flexible you are. Well, it's time to get back to the work. I've been a lot of yik-yakking, and we'll show off the other fixes that I got. We see some stripper deck plates and some cornstalk rolls, but we'll get to those. We got some fun magic in store for that. So let's get to the hammering, and let's fix this hunk of green paint. My workbench has been the tire. Isn't it lovely? So we have these long roll pins, and there's holes through the cast rollers. Now, if you want to know something really stupid, these don't always line up. I found that out the hard way. Somewhere I have a souvenir of a bent roll pin out here, because I was hammering it too hard, and I bent it, and that was fun to extract. It'd be nice to have a workbench back here, but we're just going with what we got. Bet that's loud, because you're mounted to the picker right now. We tap it through, and they stick out, oh, a little less than 1/4 of an inch. You can see that in the darkness. Sticking out right there. And we're going to do that a bunch more times. A lot of hammering. That one went through smoothly. I'm glad it did. It's a pain when they don't. Now comes the fun part. Putting the last metal roller in. Now we can get so far. I'll slow it down so I don't smash my finger like that. We come down to the other end. Use our handy dandy twine to go fishing down here. Reach for the sky. We use the one brush shaft, kind of hold this up. Now we tie a knot and put our board through. Of course, you can't see that from down there. But I already demonstrated how that works at this end. Now, time for tension on the string. As I'm slowly pulling it down my way. Now the hard part is getting it set just the right length. Put your roller in. Another thing we got to watch out when we put this in, which we don't have to do it yet, but when we put the gear on your end, is to make sure the husk pins don't hit each other on these two metal rolls. The metal rolls turn away from each other towards the rubber rolls on the outside. I don't know if we can see down into the abyss, but if I slowly untie my knot, we will let the roll down ever so gently. Come on, knot. That was going well. We need to go just another 1/2 inch down. Now my knot won't behave. There we go. I have this. I should have picked. There we go. Perfect. I should have picked a longer string. Now we reach down here and hope we have proper angle and rotation of our bearing. Hope. Yep, slid in. I don't know if you saw that magical moment. It's dark down here, but that is the magical moment. It means I eyeballed where the bearing should be. Let's go back the other end and play around, shall we? Now is the fun part. We gotta replace the bearings. Somehow I already popped one out. Now to pop the other one out. I used a bearing for a spacer so we have room to turn this. Now there's probably better ways to do this, but this seems to work pretty well. And it uses a hammer. And I've gotten lucky and haven't cracked any of the holders yet. Now this one has already got a little angle to it, so it should pop off real nicely. Oh yeah. This is probably a good one to demonstrate on. I have had them before. I've had to tap and tap and tap and tap some more. This one, if I was feeling strong, yep. Once you get it so far, they'll turn by hand. Vice grips are set up. First, we're going to take the screwdriver. There's a little gap where light's coming through. Spin the bearing. Close enough. And of course, there's our slot to get it out. And the bearing's not lined up. So conveniently, take the vice grips, orient it properly. Voila, falls right out. And you kind of got to do the opposite to put one of them back in. You'll have to give it a little tap and then twist. Do the opposite of what I just did there. And that should be fairly simple for installing a spherical bearing. Spherical refers to the outside race. Now there's, let's say, flat outer races, and those are usually a compression fitting when they're round, and there'll be a snap ring. Because of the spherical nature of these, they won't go back or forth, but it allows them to twist. And in our environment, because the rocker arms will move a little bit, yes, they need to be able to have a little bit of side-to-side twist. Now I can get the bearing twisted so far by hand. And then slide it back at the end of our shaft. I'm a little worried that I was able to twist that into place by hand. It makes me feel better using a hammer than if the tolerance is still tight and it hasn't worn the housing any. And plus, these are Chinese bearings, so their quality assurance from previous experience can be a little weak. Like I said earlier, I haven't tried this method before. Yes. I've not tried this method of putting on this bearing holder to both shafts once they were in position. So far, it's going pretty good. It's a lot easier to do one shaft at a time. Plus, I can see to line up the center of the hex bearing with the hex shaft, and that slid right on. And I should have been doing that since the very beginning. Go to our parts table, find our 1/2 inch short little carriage bolts. Now this end offers some adjustment. We didn't see it closely, but there is a slightly slotted hole that these go through in the frame that allows for adjustment of the drive chain, which we will see that eventually. Eventually. All things will happen eventually. Who's ready for more hammering? So conveniently, this chunk of bar stock fits in and is just slightly smaller than the bushing. First, we got to drive the old one out. Conveniently, the hitch pin hole here is about the right size. We see it just starting to come through, and we'll just slam that sucker right out. And then that happens. The end of the punch is mushroomed just slightly so it'll get stuck and not go flying through. And I guess we can do the opposite. pretend like the bushing gets started. It does have a beveled edge, so that'll help it start. You know, as long as it's close, then we pound that sucker home. I guess we don't have to do it over the hole. And the fun part, if we look closely, the bushing is just a little longer than the casting. So I'll make sure there's equal amount sticking out on both sides, because we're OCD like that. It's time to put the bushing inside the other bushing. This is hardened steel, and that's just brass. But first, before you do anything with bushings, you gotta lube it up in there. Got some white lithium grease. This will be the only time that there will be grease. So we wanna make sure it's good and coated. Now, I did see on JD Husker's personal machine that they'd experimented with fitting a grease zerk to this. I think that would be a fantastic idea. Apparently they didn't find it to be of much use because they gave up on it. Now, if I don't have this started in here tight or straight, it's gonna be a pain. There we go. Good, tight fit. And some extra grease we'll save to put inside the bearing to save a little bit of wear on our shaft. Some of the ends, you can tell there's some wear. The hex is starting to get a little rounded, so hopefully a little grease will lube it up and it won't wear from just being dry. And as always, we have a rag to clean up our extra lube. Fairly simply, the top end of our rubber roll bearing slides on. We grab a gear to slide on the end of it. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, play. Maybe I should have put some grease in there. There is a little bit extra from sliding the bearing on to hopefully stop it from wearing more. Maybe a little bit of play is good, maybe not. Find a brand new roll pin somewhere here on the table. Got a whole new bag of these so they don't fall out. Now, maybe you can see this, it's a little dark. One end is smaller than the other. We're guessing it was that left side or the right side. And as usual, more hammering. But it helps to have a random rod to pretend is a punch to help you do your placement of the roll pin. That's a bouncy ride for you guys because you're mounted to the picker right now. Close enough. It's through. Now we're ready to stick it in there. Should we go right or left with this one? Well, I guess we're going right. It's gonna be just like the metal before. We're gonna get this pushed all the way in, and then we'll line up our bolt hole at the very end. And it's gonna be just like the metal, where I go down there with the string and help this out to get it lined up. Oh, but the rubber, because of these big cleats, has trouble sliding over our holder. But we like challenges. Come back here, hope I don't smash a finger, and pull it in. There's one thing I forgot to put in. And usually we put these special bolts that go at the springs to tension these rocker arms, which we can just as easily slide it in and get it started before we put the bolt in. We're only going to start it 1 or 2 turns so we can then collapse this back and then put our bolt through the hole. But this is going to be a 3-handed greasy job. Actually, not too bad. Sometimes before I've had to really push and struggle because of the spring just gets in the way. Now this inner hardened bushing should be long enough compared to our brass that we will compress that and the arm will be free to move. Why does that bolt seem so short? That's difficult. I think that bolt's too short. We have to get another one of those and do this all over again. Well, looky there, that bolt's different. So for the longer one, we try this. I've been sorting through my pile of bolts and things on the goodies on the table over here. So these are the ones that are left. Conveniently, all this stuff is 3/4. Very conveniently. And this has been very handy, the ratcheting wrench. Now I gotta remember, before we tighten the tension spring, or compression spring, make sure that's super tight. This went on so easily because there's no gear up top. So we come back to our collection of parts, and this is the extra long shaft that's going to get a chain, so I got to get that proper stack of parts. We put a gear on, hopefully. Hammer time. And now we find out just how out of time we can be with these. There we go. There was a spacer washer on this one. There will be other bits. There's 2 sprockets to go there, but I'm not worried about those yet. And we may as well put on our other gear. But we have to eyeball down between these 2, which we look pretty good, to make sure the husk pins won't hit each other. I never have counted how many teeth are on these, but apparently there's enough that they all line up and are not staggered from the flat sides of the hex. And I just had a really terrible realization that I tapped this one in too far. So that's the only downside of putting these rolls in separately, is then getting them too far down, because what holds them from falling down to the bottom end are the roll pins. So now I gotta hope that I can pull this back or bust a knuckle. So I gotta go down to the other end and pry it back. We have plenty of room here in the middle. I'll be able to get the roll pins in. With a little pry bar action at the bottom end, there's some room to go between the roll and the holder. And I pried it back. Take a handy dandy alignment punch, stick it through your hole, and then pull it back so there's enough room to get the roll pin in. And of course, we've seen all this with more hammering. Everybody loves hammers. Number 1, most important tool for this whole project has been the ratcheting wrench. And this is why. Because there's limited space. You can see it better over here. Can't get a ratchet in there. This is probably the most important tool for this whole project. Saves a ton of time, so you're not taking the wrench off, repositioning. It's a real lifesaver. It's like great for you need the low profile. Now when we tighten these up, in the directions from JD Huskers, they recommend the tip of this special bolt to be 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch away from the end of the rocker arm. There'll be quite a bit of compression on this spring. And probably with your camera angle you can't see it, but I'm aiming to get the tip about to that coil. And we're going to take it down until we just start to see it peep across there, which has been about 3-ish threads. I got this one plenty tight. About 3 threads from the end. And we have to have, you can't have these both halfway out. You have to have one in before you start the other. So we'll go ahead and get this one started. Just a few turns so it won't fall out. And I'll have our spring sitting here ready and waiting so we don't forget, you know, because I'm prone to that. Pry bar, always very handy. Always great to double as a hammer if you need be. We have the chains on. I got all the rolls in. Springs are tightened. So now, remember I talked about slotted holes right here. To tighten the chains, got to push them away. That's probably plenty tight. It is now freezing cold out, as you can tell by the extra layer of hood. We're still working on the picker. Got a little bit of snow, so perfect time to be in the barn where it's not sunny, not windy, but still freezing cold. So what's in my hand? It's a brush for the corn picker. Everybody knows how the new ideas have those finger wheels that break off. Well, John Deere has these brushes. That, I don't have a used one, but these can still break off just as easily. They're supposed to be gentler. Now, I already did this part, and I highly recommend using a straight-sided punch. Do we see that? Some punches, you know, are fully beveled the whole way down. No, it's a complete angle. This is straight-sided, no angles. Then you can take a hammer, tap, tap, tap the punch. Now, it's going to be hard to see, but if I can get this held properly, you know, these two edges come together and, you know, crimp the brush in. It'll slide together like such. It's not going to be by hand. You're going to have to take a hammer and really tap it in there. So that was the fun. Now we got to put these things back in. I was labor saving and only took 3 of the 4 bolts fully out. And when these bolt together, it'll clamp this last set of brushes in. So we have a nice big 6-sided star looking thing. Well, it's freezing cold. I want to put gloves on. I'm going to climb up in this like a jungle gym yet again. I'm going to put the brushes in. I really should find myself a little monkey. Like I said earlier, this thing has become my jungle gym. I've been getting good at climbing in and out of this thing. And that's how I've been doing the brushes on this back one. This piece of metal here, whatever it is, has made a fantastic seat. I gotta straddle it. Like you're riding on a motorcycle, I guess. Because there is no good way to get down here to tighten these bolts. I can make one side easy to access and the other side's kind of hard to get to. If you just kind of reach your arm underneath to play and hold the carriage bolts in and reach from the top, it's not too bad. And don't fall off while you're up here. Isn't this just fun? The one thing I did notice, now those ones aren't too bad, But some of the brushes rub, like this one. Don't know what that's all about. That's not gonna extend brush life any. So when we put these on, excuse the squeaking, we see I left the one bolt in. So when we do that, we have to get creative, open, and make sure the flat sides line up with the inside of the star. That makes it much easier to swing this other side around. Now we can see where we had rust is about where these should be positioned, but I think those weren't positioned well, because in the previous positioning of these, we can see this brush just makes contact with this rubber roll. That's pretty good. I made the mistake of putting this one back exactly. And underneath my foot, we can see this brush, and it makes more contact than I thought. This brush, actually. I'm gonna reposition this one. Look at that. That's a lot of interference. So I'm gonna take this one, have to loosen all these dumb things, and move it over just a little bit. And, I mean, I guess a little bit of contact with the rubber is okay, but we don't need to be brushing the rubber. The goal is to push the material down. So we actually almost need to be more in the valley in these low spots, because all the ears are going to fall over the metal rolls more. So that's the fun. Make sure you have all your brushes, bolts, and other bolts handy to be ready to put in, or else it's a lot of climbing up and down. Yep, good exercise. We might as well see the finished product while we're at it. Look at how nice and bright the new brushes are. Holy cow, my toes are froze. That was not a comfortable job. But it's done. And it'll help make nice, clean, yellow wagons of corn.